Hi and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. I'm back on the road again, on my way to the cinema. I've got to travel a bit to go to the cinema this time. I'm heading up to Sunshine and the Village cinemas because I am about to see Terrifier 3, the fourth movie starring Art the Clown. The first one was All Hallows Eve, but he was only in part of that. And on the left here, you can see Carl's Jr., which is my favourite burger joint around here, mostly because they do a really good loaded fries. And yep, everybody's beeping their horns around here. So yeah, it's quite a warm day. We're doing okay with the weather. It's warming up for the springtime, and I'm about to head around the back way to get over to Sunshine, which is kind of not very close to where I live. Now, on the left, you're going to see a whole bunch of new buildings, and you may possibly get the water tower up there, because that water tower sits on something called Cowie's Hill, which is a dormant scoria volcano. It's not actually extinct, it's only dormant, and there is the possibility that at some stage in the future that volcano is going to erupt again. There's a whole bunch of volcanoes, a whole string of them stretched right across the western part of the state of Victoria, and they may at some stage decide to wake up, scratch their balls and blast debris all over the state, which I'm not looking forward to because it's going to mess my real estate value up. But yeah, these are all fairly new parts of the world, those suburbs. When we first moved into here 20 odd years ago, a lot of this was just canola fields and grazing land, but they put houses on it because obviously people need homes, and it's not a bad part of the world really. It's not as pretty as some other parts of Melbourne, but it is very multicultural and culturally diverse. We had just had a big Hindu festival at the big local park. And the interesting thing is, you go onto the Facebook groups which celebrate different events in the area, and there's a 50-50 split between white racists who complain about multicultural festivals because they're white racists, and the people who are celebrating the multicultural festivals and are very positive about them, myself included. But it's always disheartening for me when I get on these Facebook groups and you find all of these bitter white people complaining about the cultural diversity of Australia in the 21st century. I mean, I grew up in a fairly monocultural area of Australia in the 60s, and I learnt and I adapted and I embraced diversity because it makes me a happier person to not be bitter and twisted about things. Cynicism and bitterness, which I've indulged at various times in the past, are just not who I want to be. They're not my best self, and I'm aiming towards my best self. I mean, being your best self isn't really a destination, it's a journey. You head towards something that is your ideal of who you want to be. And I am doing that. And yes, these roads are a bit rough, but I don't care. By the way, I'm using my Sony ZV-1 Mark II camera sitting on the dashboard. I've got a bit of thick double-sided tape holding it on there, which is it seems to be working quite well, and it's a better camera than the other one I was using, the old Panasonic. So I'm embracing that. Now up ahead we are going to hit a roundabout, and I'm going to be turning right at that roundabout. This roundabout was in a movie. If you remember the Nicolas Cage movie Knowing, which is a very apocalyptic movie, right near the end there's a big car and truck crash which heads towards the end of the movie. That happened right on this intersection. It looks a bit different than it did then. A lot of that film was filmed in Melbourne, in fact all of it was. But right here at this intersection is where that really nasty car accident happened in Nicolas Cage movie Knowing. So there are things that get filmed in this area, not a lot, but there are occasional things that get filmed in this area. And I thought I'd take us past this one on our way up to Sunshine. Now, all of this used to be canola fields. Canola, some people call it rapeseed, but I call it canola here. And the canola fields used to stretch. This time of year, they would have been bright yellow all the way around this area. And there's still kind of wild canola that keeps growing on the fringes of things around here. And there are a couple of low-lying areas here, sometimes get flooded with water. They haven't put a bridge in over this part, but they sometimes get a bit flooded, which is always an extra bit of fun. And the roads are very dodgy around here, and there are always big construction trucks fanging it around here. This is the one that usually gets flooded the most, just here. And on the right, as we get up the rise here, you may see an old colonial era farmhouse which is being renovated a bit up on the next corner over there. And I'm stopping for the lights here, you may see it there. It's colonial era, and it can't be torn down for that reason. And so they're going to do something with it. I hope they do something nice with it too. So I'm kind of winding around the edge of the urban sprawl as it exists at the moment here in Melbourne, or at least in this part of Melbourne. Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. If people want to know, I am doing pretty good at the moment. Been spending a day a week pretty much just wandering around seeing movies at various cinemas, and it's really great fun. Now we're going to head up Derrimut Road. Derrimut was named after one of the Aboriginal leaders in this area. There's a whole bunch of different place names around here which are First Nations place names, and I'm glad that they are. If you go over into the eastern suburbs, the civilised conservative suburbs of Melbourne, there's a lot more place names over that part of town which are coloniser place names. There are a few that aren't, but for the most part they are. But in these newer suburbs, people obviously have a more keen awareness of First Nations heritage, and so a lot more place names reflect the original inhabitants of this land. And as you can see, there's a lot of construction going on around here. So yeah, I'm just heading over to Sunshine, which is a very multicultural area. There's a big East Asian population in that area, and so lots of good restaurants when you get into the main drag. But where I'm going is the local shopping centre, which is a flashback to the 1990s in style. I will take the Osmo Pocket 3 with me when I get out of the car and start walking towards the cinema. I'll do a bit of footage of that, because that cinema is peak 1990s cinema styling, and they haven't changed it in the 3 decades since then. And I kind of like that. It's tacky, but it is reflective of a certain moment in the history of cinema architecture. And it's not the place I'd prefer to go. My local cinemas in Werribee would be the ones I'd prefer to go to, but they're currently being renovated. The whole side of the big shopping centre where they're housed has been gutted, and they're being renovated, and hopefully by the end of the year or early next year, those cinemas will reopen and I can walk to the cinema from my place rather than spending fossil fuels getting to Sunshine or taking public transport all the time to go to the Sun Cinema in Yarraville. What I might do too one time is I'll go to the cinemas down in Geelong, the other major city here in Victoria, which is about 60 kilometres from my place. They're the other option I've got, because I've got an Australian Film Critics Association pass which lets me into the cinema for review purposes, but I can only go to certain cinemas with that, which is fine. I mean, it's part of the game, but I really prefer to support the cinemas which honour those cards. Every year I pay a fee for the association card, and that then enables me to go and not pay to go and see a movie I'm going to review, which the membership pays for itself very quickly. And I realise it is a privileged thing for me to do that, but I've worked a long time in reviewing movies for little or no money, that I really am kind of comfortable with the fact that I've built up my skill level and my knowledge enough that I can get a Film Critics Association pass and not have to fork out for my meagre amounts of money that I have to see some movies. There are movies that when I go with Middle-Aged Geek Girl to see films, we go to Reading Cinemas, and that one doesn't honour the pass, so I've got to pay for tickets there, but I can kind of squeeze that in as necessary. We're now in kind of semi-rural areas. This is all going to be built up, and there's a strip here which is going to be industrial, so there's going to be warehouses and factories and things like that, and you'll see some structures up here reflecting that. But there's also urban sprawl up ahead as well, which it's kind of disappointing, because when I first moved here there was a lot of countryside around, and of course you do need grass and trees and things like that to breathe basically, but the urban sprawl has reached here and nothing I can do about it, so I've got to kind of accept it. I can get to country areas very quickly. In fact, one day I'm going to work out which roads they used to film the original Mad Max movie, and they're not too far away. They're between here and Little River, and I may do a little bit of a driving vlog along those roads and just show you what they look like now. And they haven't changed all that much, which is a lot of fun. And every time I watch the original Mad Max, which I don't do that often, but still, I can see those roads and go, yeah, I've been there, yeah, I know that, yeah, that's local. And there are a couple of towns that also have been shown in the original Mad Max. There's Clunes, where the big book festival is every year, and I go there and I usually film something there. And there's also Little River itself, which is kind of between here and Geelong. And Little River also featured in the movie. The original Mad Max was done on a shoestring budget. It's amazing it got made at all. It's amazing it ended up being a cult film. George Miller actually edited Mad Max in the spare bedroom of his apartment, his flat, in northern suburbs of Melbourne. They just basically did it in their spare room, which I love. I love that kind of guerrilla filmmaking. I don't think he does that again these days, but he did the first one there. And that's how Australian film was in those days. There wasn't a lot of support for it. You got the resources you could, however the hell you could. And every exploitation movie you see, up till about the 1980s or the 1970s stuff, was at least partly a passion project that the creators just had to do, and they roped in friends to help them. It really was a garage kind of thing, and that rawness gets reflected in the wildness of a lot of exploitation films. Really a groovy thing. And then in the 1980s, when they started getting the 1080 tax deals, the movies became more of a commercial thing. The financing for them was so that somebody could not pay taxes. They got a big tax break from investing in film, and it became somewhat different and more inclined to capitalism. And so even though there are any number of great Australian films that were made in that era, there's also a lot of shit ones that were made basically so that somebody wearing white shoes could get a tax break. And in fact, David Stratton wrote an entire book about that called The Avocado Plantation. David Stratton's getting a new book out about Australian movies in the 21st century. One of our great film critics, he worked on TV a long time with Margaret Pomeranz. And also David Stratton was one of the people who, in the 1960s and 70s, helped break down the censorship that was part of Australia's film industry. He's got a new book coming out, and I'm going to have to pick up a copy of it because I've got his other two. And so I may have to dig deep into the piggy bank around the end of the year and get myself a copy of David Stratton's new book about 21st century Australian cinema. I mean, the guy's in his late 70s, maybe his 80s now, and he's still pumping this stuff out. His vision's going, but he's still got this unending and complete passion for Australian cinema. And you know, the guy's a living legend in the Australian film industry for that. So yeah, now we're heading across the railway tracks. These railway tracks head towards Ballarat, the regional city where the Eureka Stockade happened. And there's usually the little fast sprinter trains that come along here, and we may well see one. In fact, we're going to, as it crosses ahead of me. There's your little sprinter train doing the commuter runs to Ballarat and Bacchus Marsh and a bunch of other places. I haven't ridden that train. I really should do that, because I get incredibly cheap train tickets, because I am retired officially, though YouTube is starting to become almost a full-time job in the best possible way. So we go across the railway tracks. There aren't many level crossings left in Melbourne, because there was a big government thing to remove level crossings because they were slowing traffic down, and they were also, unfortunately, a magnet for people who wanted to end themselves. And so a lot of the level crossings have disappeared, and there was this immense infrastructure project to get rid of them so that traffic flow was easier and people weren't tempted to use them for unfortunate things. So what's going to happen here is I'm going to chuck a kind of big U-turn as we get over this bridge, and we're going to head in towards Sunshine, heading towards the city but not going as far as the city. You can see the big loop on that street sign ahead. We're going on the M8 into the city. But yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to Terrifier 3. It's not usually my kind of film to watch a very vivid horror film, but I think there's enough humour in the Terrifier movies that I really enjoy what they are. And I know at some stage Umbrella are going to release it on disc, and so I'm looking forward to getting Terrifier 3, so I've got the complete set. Umbrella did send me the other movies, and I watched them. And the weird thing is, Art the Clown combines the two things that people don't like in clowning. First off, people do have that phobia of clowns, and Middle-Aged Geek Girl's got a bit of that. But also, Art is a mime, and people don't like mimes even more than they don't like clowns. So you've got layering of distastefulness in Art the Clown, which is kind of amusing for me. And there is a really dark humour to the Terrifier movies that Damien Leone makes, which are kind of a saving grace for them. I think self-important, really hard horror movies are a bit kind of edgelordy, but where you've got humour involved as well, I think that is the little extra secret sauce that makes them much more entertaining than many other horror movies that people like Eli Roth made. Are kind of, too edgy. They're too self-consciously edgy. Whereas something like the Terrifier movies is a lot more fun and a lot more interesting. And so I enjoyed those movies a lot more than really nasty horror films. Well, Terrifier movies I suppose are nasty, but you know what I mean. And I think it's partly the fact that I did watch for a long time a lot of trauma movies. Lloyd Kaufman's Trauma Company made so many really over-the-top and outrageous horror movies, but they were always with that tongue-in-cheek humour. And I think that is, if you're going to make a horror movie, and many people are, if you're going to make money in this movie and you want to make your first movie, doing a horror movie is probably the way to go, because you will make buck on it. And I think if you're going to do that, throwing some humour in is never a bad thing. There are a lot of horror movies that really hit well that don't have a lot of humour in them. I mean, things like The Demon Disorder, which I just watched, a fairly recent Australian horror film set on a rural property in Queensland. That one didn't have humour in it, but on the other hand, it had a purpose. It was a metaphor for something else, and not something nasty, but something that a lot of people experience in their lives. And so that metaphorical demonic possession thing, when the movie reveals that to you, the fact that it doesn't have humour in it is acceptable, because it's got another quality that brings it out of the ordinary and brings it out of the mundane splatter film kind of thing. And I like that. I like movies that have a nice rate of reveal, that start you out with an initial premise and then elaborate on it or take it in a different direction, but not one that's kind of out of tune with the rest of the movie. I like those movies that give us those reveals and give us more reveals and take the audience along in a respectful way. I mean, having watched Joker 2 and realising that the movie's creator, Todd Phillips, really disrespected the audience and made a movie that was incredibly self-indulgent and stupid. I find that incredibly problematic, because even if I'm not paying for the movie ticket, I'm investing part of my lifespan in someone's creative work. And if I'm going to do that, there are certain implicit agreements in what you experience in that. They're going to play fair with you. They're going to be honest with you. They're not going to pull the rug out from under you or take the movie in a direction that isn't consistent with the rest of the film. And they're not going to just indulge their own passions and self-interest without having that awareness of the fact that an audience is a crucial part of filmmaking. And that's people piss me off, because they've got this enormous opportunity to make something, and to make something well. And their weakness as a human being impedes them in doing that. I mean, I'm not in favour of studios controlling the films that creative people make, but I was actually talking about this on one of the comments on my YouTube channel, that if somebody has a really big hit, they get a lot more creative control from the studios and the producers, and so they can take things where they want to take them. But that requires discipline as well. That requires them to control themselves and control their silly urges while making a good film. And for me, that's something that I suppose is difficult when you've been incredibly successful and people are sucking up to you en masse and giving you resources to make any film you like, in a sense. I think there is that tendency to just go crazy and just indulge every silliness that you've got in your head. And one of the reasons why I admire Tarantino so much is, even though he does do outrageous things with movies, he always has that awareness of audience. And that is such a crucial thing for any filmmaker to have. You've got to know that there's going to be a bum on a seat jamming popcorn into their face watching your movie, and that person is the most important person in the world for your movie. And so you've got to, you can show that you're a smarty pants and you know things and you can put in movie references and things like that. But you've always got to bed that stuff down with bringing the audience along with you. And I don't think Joker 2 did that. Really a missed opportunity, and something which maybe if they had another voice saying, hey, why don't we try this? Or hey, why don't we take this in that direction? Because there's something there we've got to build on. Didn't get that with Joker 2, Folie à Deux. Did not happen at all. We're in St Albans and Keilor now. We're in Station Street. Lots of good bakeries along here. I'm going to have to try some of these places at some stage. I say that everywhere I go. Got to try that place out. I've got to look at that. I've got to see this. The world's too big a place to indulge all of it. And I really like the fact that there is a richness of ethnic diversity where I live. One of the things, a few years ago, middle-aged gig girl and I went to Tasmania. We took the ferry over to Tasmania and enjoyed the hell out of it. We had 2 weeks in Tasmania, travelled all around the island. And then we got to Launceston and I felt deeply uncomfortable. We've been travelling for a while, so there's obviously a little bit of that in the mix. But I was travelling around and I went, I don't feel right here, there's something wrong. And we stopped and had lunch and we looked around a few shops and did the things you usually do. Went along the Tamar River, which is beautiful, by the way. And I realised what it was. I was in an area where there were only white people. And northern Tasmania has got a history of religious nuttiness and racial intolerance, let's say. And so Launceston, at least when I was there, had no people who were not white people in it, apart from the ladies who worked in the nail salons who were Vietnamese. And subconsciously, my mind found that wrong and found that disturbing and found that uncomfortable for me. Because for many, many years I've been living in an area which is racially diverse and ethnically diverse and culturally diverse. And so my comfort zone, as far as places where I travel, is to see non-white people a lot. And when that didn't happen, subconscious alarm bells went off in my head. And I was suddenly thinking, something's not right here. But when I realised what it was, those alarm bells stopped ringing. And I went, okay, that's what it is. And, I could let go of it because it wasn't unknown anymore. Which is kind of weird. And I don't know whether anybody else feels that when they go to certain areas. I suppose people of colour and people who aren't white feel that in a lot of places and feel it constantly in some cases. But for me, it was a new experience. And it made me aware of that feeling, I suppose, that other people who don't look like me feel a lot more often than I did. And I'm glad that I felt that. But let me know if you do too, because it's an odd thing and a weird thing for me. But I think it's an important awareness to have, that not everybody lives the same life as you and has the same experiences. By the way, there's a big mosque with a tower up there off on the left. And I remember there was a lot of, not in my backyard, when the mosque was going up, which of course happens with anything like that. But yeah, it's a weird world, but I'd really like it to be more interesting at times, and sometimes it is. So yeah, we're almost there now. We're not too far away at all. I've been waffling on for way long and enjoyed myself doing it. So we've just got to go a little bit further, and then I'll be turning off to the right and we'll be heading into where Sunshine Cinemas are. And I've got about half an hour to kill before the movie starts. I'm going to go and buy the ticket fairly early because there are sometimes new people at the ticket counter, and when I flash my little card, I've got to explain it to them, and then they've got to talk to their manager, and the manager says, yes, this is a review person for this movie, so you give them the free ticket, they write down the number of my Australian Film Critics Association card, and everything's okay. But that process can sometimes take a little while, and so I've got to give myself a bit of lead time when that happens. And there's a speed bump here on this there, just before the red lights, because I hear that people used to fang their cars down this road, and so they put a speed bump in just before the lights. Again, this is a bit of an industrial area. You can see the high tension power lines here. Obviously you can't put houses too close to them, and these are the kind of ones where you can stand underneath them with a neon tube in your hand, and the neon tube will glow because it gets induction electricity from the high tension power lines. I'm not going to try that. I'm kind of not comfortable with that. And I can see some grain silos up ahead on the right, which means we're almost where we need to be. And traffic hasn't been too egregiously bad, which is a nice change. I think I've timed this drive pretty well, because I'm finding myself less tolerant of peak hour traffic. I like open roads where I can drive around and just enjoy myself, but stop-start peak hour traffic annoys the hell out of me these days. I'm not used to it. I don't do it on a regular basis, so I don't build those steeled nerves that are required for peak hour traffic. And like I said, down here I'm going to be turning off to the right and into the car park of the shopping centre where the cinemas are. So I will end the vlog when I get there. There's a little bit of traffic here, but I'll make do. Seeing a lot more Teslas on the road too. Does anybody else judge people who buy Teslas? I do. I don't mind people having electric cars, but I find that a lot of Tesla drivers are Elon Musk cultists, and I'm not comfortable with that. He's a dangerous and nasty human being, even though of course I use his platform to promote my YouTube channel 3 times a week. I'm still not comfortable with the Musk. He's not the kind of person you let hold your wallet while you go swimming. And there's this thing I've got about billionaires. I think if you're very wealthy or very famous, you've got this tendency to acquire a mental illness. And that mental illness is partly caused by the fact that nobody really says no to you. And so every single brain fart you have starts sounding in your own head like the Sermon on the Mount. And so you can say and do dangerous things because there's no guardrails around your actions. You've got the resources to do these things. And it's just a dangerous headspace for any human being to be in. Just pulling into the car park now, which is a little bit full, but I'm going to move down to the right hand side here because the cinemas are down here. And the only question remaining is whether I eat before or after the movie, and I've got no preference on that. Not particularly hungry, but I am at some stage going to get some junk food into me. But I will try to park a little further down, closer to the cinema, just to show you what's there. Okay, I'll pull in one of these ones after I show you the big Village Cinemas sign down here. And I'll park as close as I can to it because I'm lazy. See, there's the Village Cinema sign, and I will swing around here and I will park over here. So as I said, I'm going to take the Osmo Pocket 3 in, and and I'll get some footage in the cinema. I may not talk while I'm doing it. I may still talk while I'm doing it. But thanks for being a part of this, and you'll get a bit more in just a moment.